is from PRISM. Rollbacks to child labor protections are on the rise. In January alone, 8 states took new action on rolling back child labor protections by eliminating work hour time limits and minimum age restrictions. Wow, okay.
Brian Scanlon dreads any passage of Indiana's House Bill 1093. The new bill would remove provisions that protected children between the ages of 14 and 17 years old who work year-round. For some students in the high school English teachers class at North Central High School in Indianapolis, some of those provisions safeguarded them from working more than 9 hours in a day between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. If I already have high school seniors who are already working until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, then there are no protections for them with these new policies, Scanlon said. And these new laws might make things even worse for me as a teacher. In January alone, 8 states introduced or took new action on rolling back child labor protections by eliminating work time shifts, work time limits, and minimum age restrictions. In response, advocacy groups and policy analysts are prioritizing civic engagement around an underreported pervasive issue that intersects with other public health issues. The challenge lies in cutting through the noise during the election season now that 28 states have quietly introduced bills to weaken protections since 2021. All under a Democratic president, by the way.
Who still hasn't done anything about Roe v. Wade either?
I doubt all these are.
Abortion.
I doubt all these are all red states. In response to situations like Scanlon's, where child labor issues creep into public education, a new campaign to end U.S. child labor emphasizes how issues surrounding minor workers are not discrete from other issues that Americans will consider during the elections. The campaign launched on February 20th with a shared agenda written and signed by nonprofit organizations, trade unions, and academic institutions that work in the fields of child labor and exploitation. The recommendations include wage increases, protection of immigration statuses, and children's right to an attorney and access to general assistance programs. If your children are working, you can't actually achieve education for all. You will never have the health outcomes that you want. You will forever have a large segment of your population living in poverty, and you will continue to have malnutrition. The executive director of the Kalish Children's Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to eradicating children exploitation and advocating for the protection of children in national and international policies. This is a cyclical problem. Child labor is not this thing that stands alone. It is so interconnected with so many issues in any country. In its announcement, the campaign to end U.S. child labor cites recent alarms from the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division, which reported an 88% increase in the number of children employed in violation of child labor laws since 2019. On October 19, 2023, the division's 740 inspectors were working on more than 800 child labor investigations. We have less than 800 inspectors for 11 million workplaces. How is that possible? Kochar asked. But these violations have been going on. We just haven't known about it because enforcement has really stepped it up the last few years. Many of the state-level rollbacks coincide with immigration restrictions in states like Florida, which have historically relied on migrant workers and undocumented families to source labor. According to Thomas Kennedy, an organizer with the Florida Immigrant Coalition and a child of undocumented Argentine parents, the state currently looks to minor workers as a response to a worker shortage exuberated by Governor Ron DeSantis' controversial changes to immigration laws that are affecting the state's demographics. Most recently, Florida lawmakers have been working to pass House Bill 49, which would allow employers to schedule 16 and 17-year-olds for unlimited hours and eliminate their meal and rest breaks. DeSantis' immigration policies created a push factor for migrants to leave the state. So we see Florida farm worker towns becoming ghost towns, Kennedy said. A lot of seasonal agricultural workers that come for specific parts of the harvest process are just avoiding the state. You're starting to see some of that develop in Florida. And what was the answer? They said, let's put teenagers to work. For policy analysts, activating the American public around child labor legislation reversals comes with bringing attention to the language that bills use that seem like protections. Dustin Pugel, a policy director at Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, points to the rapid passage of the state House Bill 255, which went through the state's House of Representatives on February 22nd, as an example of when co-opted language tricks the public into thinking that such rollbacks are positive. According to Pugel, whose work lies in digging into these bills, understanding what the implications are, and then being able to put that into plain language for lawmakers, media, and general audiences. House Bill 255 would repeal state-specific restrictions on employment for children between 14 and 18 years old, and allow 16 and 17-year-olds to work all night and during school hours, all without the state's population fully understanding these ramifications. This bill takes some of the language that was in our regulations, which it eliminates, and puts it back into the same statute, he says. So it seems as though for some protections, but it leaves out quite a few. For example, in our current regulations, 14 and 15-year-olds can't operate a mower or a cutter for landscaping, but the sponsor owns a landscaping company, so he left that language out of this new bill.
Yep,
KCEP,
let's give kids fucking power tools.
yeah, KCEP also raises awareness around some of the biggest groups that push for reversals, including the Foundation for Government Accountability. Founded and based in Naples, Florida, the conservative public policy think tank is behind some of the current reversal of child labor legislation across the country, including in Kentucky, West Virginia, and Florida. Recent bills cite statewide worker shortages as reasons to reverse existing provisions around child labor. Various advocates challenge this framing, such as Jessica Heldman, an associate professor in child rights at the University of San Diego School of Law. The University of San Diego Children's Advocacy Institute also signed onto the campaign to end U.S. child labor. Everything that I have looked at indicates clear as day that it is the most vulnerable children who are becoming exploited, and these include children of low-income families and children who are coming into this country, she said. When children come from other countries, they may need to support their sponsors that are housing them and may not have the funds to actually care for them. There's pressure on those children to earn money. They may also have the desire or obligation to support their families back home. Heading into the elections, the fight against child labor rollbacks is also an exercise in teaching the public how child labor affects every other part of their livelihoods. Groups like Florida Immigrant Coalition say there are more appropriate and actionable solutions to worker shortages. One thing that could be done is expediting work permits for adults who are seeking asylum in the country and coming here to work, Kennedy said. And then, holistically speaking, wages just need to be better. We need to increase wages. We need to enact better labor protections. We need to make sure people have a union and that they can actually make a living off their jobs. As for tangible, actionable steps that Americans can take, Buell emphasizes the democratic power that one has on a state level, especially in smaller states like Kentucky, West Virginia, and Iowa. There is power in demanding increased wages and immigration protections to keep the target off unaccompanied minors and children securing a future in America. State representatives are elected by only a few thousand votes, which means that constituent concerns really do make a much bigger difference at the state level than at the federal level, he said. I always recommend that folks reach out to their legislator because even just a dozen or so complaints about a particular policy can really turn a vote. Regardless of party affiliation, it really does make a huge difference.
I have so many issues with the child labor laws, but one of the things that I was thinking about is if you're going to, make or allow kids to work that late or that long, especially during school hours, then you're also going to have to revisit the truancy policies where you hold parents accountable for children missing school. But it's factual that at some point, kids have to sleep.
Yeah.
How many kids have we had historically drop out of schooling just to go straight into the workforce? I dropped out of school at 17 to work full-time in the workforce. I did it myself. At 15, before I had my driver's license, I had to get a special green card that allowed me to drive from school to home or from home to work or work to home or work to school. But I couldn't have anyone with me until I actually had my driver's license. But I could drive myself because I lived out in the middle of nowhere. So there's so many issues with child labor laws in general, but how are we having this discussion?
It's like you won't give them a free lunch or a free breakfast at school, but you put them to work.
Oh, but they won't even give them a meal break or a break.
Or a meal break. Yeah, what the?
I get mad because I get a 30-minute meal break at work. So you've got a kid who probably hasn't ate because school won't feed them, you won't feed them, and they probably can't afford to buy food. That's why they're 13, 14, and 15 working as a mower or a landscaping cutter. You think that a kid's going to work 10 hours after they get out of school? Let's say you get out of school at 3, you get to work by, let's say 4. You clocked in by 4 o'clock. Now you got to work a 10-hour shift.
It's still 2 in the morning.
But now you also need to make sure that you're at school by 8. Oh, you also need about an hour to get home. Maybe try to, relax. Probably not going to eat anything. You're too tired.
They're getting you ready for the rest of your life.
And that's not fair. Kids are supposed to be kids. They don't need to deal with this shit. You're just trying to get them used to the idea of child labor so that whenever the election comes around, and regardless of who wins on red or blue, and we go into war, which we will, and then you try to take all of the men in the country for the forced draft, which everybody signs up for in order to get their driver's license if you are a male at the age of 16 or prior. So you all signed into it. If you have a license or state ID, you agreed to the draft and to be drafted if called upon. So when they do that and they decide, we still got women in the workforce, but now the men are gone. Let's throw kids in there. Let's have kids making our bombs and welding planes together. We'll do better than Boeing, mind you, but it's kids.
So like, hey, you can't go to war, but you can't be drafted, but you can clean this soil with toxic chemicals, please, for pennies on the dollar.
I mean, we didn't learn from children dying from the black lung that maybe having children in coal mines was not a good idea.
Yeah, just kids shouldn't work, period.
They shouldn't. They're kids. And also, you, as a state official, are failing your state's children.
Children should be students, but why would they want to be students when they want to keep us all dumb and working forever? So they're doing exactly what they want us to do. They're grooming us.
They are.
Grooming us from a young age.
Because my dad is also a dropout, so he could continue working full time. So yeah, it's aimed specifically at certain people because people who have money aren't going to need money, so their kids aren't going to have to work. This is going to make like the death rate, the age of life expectancy in the U.S. is probably going to go down, especially in those states that allow for children labor. I mean, it's just there's a whole kind of like what the fuck are we? What are we doing, guys?
They can't be drafted, but they're gonna be shot. They don't get a fucking lunch or a fucking breakfast for free at school. They get shot at while they're at school, and before school even ends, they have to try to get to their fucking job. What are we fucking doing?
Oh, we also forgot homework.
Oh yeah, there's homework in there too.
And you better have your homework returned to school the next day, or now you fail that class. So now the 23 hours that you spend grueling between school and work doesn't matter because now you're flunking because you missed one assignment. So you're asking too much of the children, both of America, of Palestine, of everywhere. We need to do better by children. You're supposed to want better for the next generation. I think we forgot about that. I think we all forgot about that.
I mean, as a society, I think we should value children and the elderly and like
improve their quality of life.
We treat them both like shit. So
statistically look at. Also, a way to retain and keep people working for you is to be a good boss, to give them lunches and breaks, to pay them a handsome wage that makes it to where they can live their lives without having to get 70 hours from you. Because
not if you just put some fucking slumlord. Just like, you know what I mean? Like, for a lot of capitalists, that doesn't make sense. So, I mean, if you're talking about like small business owners, maybe.
If you expand the quality and the life of your employers, you'll get it back because they will work harder in the less time because they won't feel like they are just drooling and just grueling and just going through the motions to make a paycheck to barely keep their heads above water and still wonder what they're going to do for next lunch, dinner, whatever. Your people are happy and live longer. You have workers that work for you longer that know what they're doing instead of watching little kids get their fingers chopped off or die from chemical burns.
You want to keep people down so you have a workforce of desperate people.
Well, what happens when people get really desperate? Almost like the French Revolution. I mean,
but people are too distracted by fucking, I don't know, like Kardashians or something.
Too distracted by the fact that there's a woman running as a presidential candidate that nobody voted to be the person running as a Democratic candidate. And who gives a fuck? She's not much of a step up from Clinton. We had Clinton running too. She wouldn't have been good for the country either. Kamala's not going to do good by the country either. Biden hasn't done good by the country either. Trump isn't going to do good by the country either. JD fucks couches. Let's just leave him out of this. He doesn't need to be involved. He needs to just keep him away from an Ashley's Furniture Outlet. Fine.
I'm happy as JD Vance and Ashley's Furniture Outlet.